What's up, guys? Today we're going to be updating my top 5 best mid-range phones for this mid-2024. So I want to kick it off with the Moto G Stylus. So a lot of people, if they don't like old flagships and stuff like that, I've been recommending this phone a lot. It's a phone that, when I picked it up, it really surprised me because it was just a really good phone. I think this only has kind of like one flaw for a mid-range phone, but for the price point, $200 locked, somewhere around $300 unlocked. It's got a all plastic design, which the phone doesn't necessarily feel cheap. It's got this really cool soft textured back on it as well too. Most people will put a case on it anyway, but I really did like the back of this phone. So it's water repellent, so it's not IP60 anything. So if you drop it in a pool or something, it's probably gonna break. You do have the built-in stylus on here as well too, which is fairly accurate. You could use it to navigate the phone, or you could do digital artwork and stuff like that. But the stylus, it does work perfectly fine, and Motorola has a bunch of little features thrown in there as well too. It's got a 6.7-inch POLED display. It's 120 Hz at 1200 nits peak brightness, and it's 1080p 395 for the PPI. Overall, it's a pretty nice looking display for the most part. Respectable bezels, really good colors. The max brightness is decent for 2024. Overall, I really didn't have any issues with the display on here. My only thing is it's not HDR10 plus or anything like that, but for this price point, I think the display looks great. So this phone is running Android 14 with the Moto skin on top of it. It's a lighter skin, but it does have a good amount of little features in there that I really like. So this phone is running the Snapdragon 8 Gen 1. It does have micro SD card support. It also has a headphone jack built in, and then you also have 128 gigs of internal storage and 8 gigs of RAM. The only thing with this phone is Motorola only promised one major OS update, then it'll get security patches after that. That's the only thing I didn't really like about this phone. But besides that, performance wise, it's actually really good. The Snapdragon 6 Gen 1 chip does fine when you're playing video games like PUBG. It played that really well. Call of Duty, it was playing really well. Performance wise, it's a very efficient chipset. So overall, the processor on here, it actually took me by surprise. It was really good, didn't heat up or anything like that. So I was really happy with the chipset on here. The speakers are fine, they're decent, nothing too special. They get loud enough. The fingerprint scanner is optical, and it's really close to the bottom of the screen. That's my only thing, but it does work, so I don't really have an issue with that. Now, the cameras on this phone are pretty good. It's a 50 megapixel standard with a 13 megapixel ultra wide. Now, it can only shoot in 1080p 120 frames, and then 32 megapixel selfie with 1080p 60, so you don't get any 4K or anything like that for video. Now, the overall image quality is actually pretty good, especially from the main lens. The ultra wide does a pretty good job as well too. I was pretty surprised by image quality. You get pretty good colors, pretty good dynamic range. The ultra wide pretty consistent with the main lens. Video on here was kind of okay, but it took pretty good pictures. I did comparisons with this phone if you guys want to check them out. So I wasn't really that mad at the picture quality. It was pretty decent for this price point. So this phone has really good battery life. It's a 5,000 milliamp hour battery. It's 30-watt charging, and it also does have wireless charging, which is rare for a mid-range phone. So the battery life definitely lasts all day, so you don't really have to worry about battery life when it comes to this phone. So like I said, I'm pretty impressed with this phone, especially if you pick it up locked to a carrier like I did for 200 bucks. This is a steal. All right, so this next phone is the Pixel 6a, which is a phone that I really like. And for this person that asked about this particular device, if you have an extra 100 bucks, like 100, maybe $30, I would get the Pixel 7a. So I'm gonna put that here as well too. And yeah, pick up one of these phones. It really depends on your how tight the budget is, but I still like the Pixel 6a. It's still gonna take extremely good stills. It's really good. I think it's still competitive even with the latest flagships. So it's an aluminum frame, it's got a plastic back, it's IP67, dust and water resistant. It does have an OLED display, and it is somewhat compact at 6.1 inches. It's HDR, and it's a very comfortable, very easy phone to hold. It's 1080p 429 for the PPI as well too. Overall, I have no issues with the display besides it not having any type of high refresh rate. So that's why I said if you get the 7a, that'll have high refresh rate display. Now this phone got its last major OS update with Android 14, and it will continue to get security updates until October 2026. So you do have the Google Tensor chipset on here, which is still perfectly fine for pretty much anything you really throw at it as far as gaming performance. It still does a decent job. I wouldn't consider this really like a great gaming phone, but it does a pretty decent job in terms of being able to play, PUBG, Call of Duty, just at, all right settings. You also do have 128 gigs of internal storage and 6 gigs of RAM. The speakers actually sound really good on this phone as well too. That's another highlight. I think really good amount of bass, very clear sound. The fingerprint scanner is okay. It's an optical one, gets the job done. But the highlight and what you're really buying this phone for, it's still one of the cheapest and best phones to take pictures with. It's a 12.2 megapixel standard with a 12 megapixel ultra wide. It also shoots in 4K 60 with an 8 megapixel selfie that shoots in 1080 30. Still photography is still absolutely amazing on this phone. Like I said, it's still comparable to the latest flagships. Great color, great detail. The ultra wide, very consistent with the main lens. Video is okay. It's not that great on this phone. But pictures, even low light shots, still look really good on this phone. So, like I said, this is extremely impressive for anyone who wants the best camera. Battery life is also pretty solid on here as well too. It's a 4,410 milliamp hour battery, 18-watt charging. Really no issues. You can get through the day with this phone, no problem. All right, so next on the list is the Nothing Phone 2A. This is a pretty interesting phone here. It's got the glyph lights on the back. It's got 3 of them, and you can use it for notifications, and you can kind of address it to other stuff about the phone as well too. But yeah, I thought it was pretty interesting. I thought it was a little bit gimmicky at first, but once you use it, it's kind of cool. It really depends on you as a person. But it's pretty much a plastic phone for the most part. It's IP54 splash, water, and dust resistant as well too. But I really like the design on here. I think it really stands out. Like I said, with the lights, I think it does look pretty cool. You got a 6.7-inch AMOLED display. It's 120 Hz HDR10 plus. 1300 nits peak brightness. It's 1080p 394 for the PPI. Nothing bad to say about the display for this mid-range phone. It's around like $400, so this is I think the most expensive one on the list so far. And it's got the Android 14 and Nothing OS skin, so it basically has kind of like I would say a bit of a heavier skin with like very cool widgets and stuff like that. So it's a kind of a cool skin. And then you also do have the MediaTek Dimensity 7200 Pro chip on here, and the chipset is fine for the most part. I didn't really run into any performance problems, any overheating problems. Was able to play PUBG just fine. Was able to play Call of Duty fine. So I didn't really have any issues with the chipset. Again, it's not going to be like crazy, powerful, but it got the job done. It's 128 gigs of internal storage and 8 gigs of RAM. The overall speakers were decent, nothing too crazy. And then you also do have on this phone a fingerprint scanner, and that is an optical one, and that works fine as well too. The image quality on here is pretty decent. Again, it's a 15 megapixel standard. It's got a 50 megapixel ultra wide as well. It only shoots in 4K 30 and a 32 megapixel selfie that shoots in 1080 60. The image quality I thought was pretty good, but I would say I will put this actually last for image quality on the list compared to the rest of these phones. It's good, but I would definitely pick up like another phone if you're extremely focused on photos here. Battery life was very good on this phone as well too, 5,000 milliamps and 45 watt. Charging easily got through the day, no problem. The Poco X6 Pro is an extremely slept on phone here in the USA. I really like this phone. So it's got a plastic back, and it's got kind of like that soft texture to it as well too. It's IP54 dust and splash resistant as well, and overall I really like the design. I think it looks great. And then you also do have an AMOLED display at 6.7 inches, and then you also have 120 Hz HDR10 plus, and then it's a 1800 nits peak brightness, so it does really good in direct sunlight. And then it is also a little bit above 1080p. It's a 1220 by 2712 resolution, and it's 446 for the PPI, so very nice high resolution, very sharp display. It's also got a Android 14 with the Hyper OS, it's got the Dimensity 8300 Ultra chipset. This chipset is a beast, so it does an excellent job at PUBG. You can play at really high settings on here, no problem. It's got 256 gigs of internal storage and 8 gigs of RAM, and I was really impressed with performance. So you could buy this phone. I think this price has dropped to like 300 on eBay, so that's where I would get it. And yeah, it's really good, guys. If you're gaming on a budget, I would definitely, this would be actually be my first choice on the list. And then you also do have on here dual speakers as well too, which sound pretty good, no issues with that. What's really slept on with these Poco phones is that you do have an infrared port. I use Poco phones every day to control the TVs and stuff around the house, and I absolutely love it. It's the only brand that's really doing it now. And then you also do have the fingerprint scanner under the display. It's an optical one. Absolutely love that. The pictures are pretty good on here. It's a 64 megapixel standard, 8 megapixel ultra wide, 2 megapixel macro. It shoots in 4K 30 with a 16 megapixel selfie that shoots in 1080 60. Overall image quality is pretty good on the Poco for the most part. Like I said, not super impressive as far as the video goes, but for still photography, I think this takes a pretty decent photo. So I was not mad at the photos at all on here. You also have a 5,000 milliamp hour battery, and then this phone also gets another plus because it has a 67 watt charging on here, so it can go from 0 to 145 minutes, and it's just really impressive. I really do like them putting the charger in the box, and then also it's just really good fast charging as well. So absolutely love this phone. Now lastly is Samsung Galaxy A54. I think this is definitely a much better phone. Samsung didn't bring the A55 to the USA this year, but you got the A54 and it is super cheap on Amazon. You can find these for like $200 to, yeah, you can. I wouldn't pay more than $200. Get this like used, refurbished. And yeah, so this is an awesome phone to consider for this price point. It's got the plastic frame. It's IP67 dust and water resistant, which I actually really love. So you can actually get this wet and it won't break immediately. It's got the Super AMOLED display. It's HDR10 plus, 1000 nits peak brightness, 6.4 inch display. It is 1080p 403 for the PPI. I have no issues with the panel on here. It's a nice, very vibrant display on here. So again, no real issues on this one. And then of course you got the Android 14 with One UI software. So if you're a Samsung fan, you can take advantage of the software. Now this has the Exynos 1380 chipset on here, which for this price point is perfectly fine. I don't have an issue with this at all. You can do gaming on here just fine. You're just not going to be going crazy. If you want to really, like I said, do a lot of gaming on a mid-range phone, try to go for something like the Poco X6 Pro, or even I think the G Stylus does a little bit better as well too. But you also do get micro SD card support on this one as well too. And I think the base is 128 gigs and 6 gigs of RAM. I think that was my base storage. And then you do have pretty good speakers on here as well too. And then the fingerprint scanner works perfectly fine. No issues with that one. And I think the pictures are actually really good on the A54. It's a 50 megapixel standard, 12 megapixel ultra wide, 5 megapixel macro, and it shoots in 4K 30. 32 megapixel selfie shoots in 4K 30 as well too. I would actually put this second for like the best pictures on the list here, for sure. I really do like the image processing that this phone does. But besides that, really good battery life, 5,000 milliamp hour battery, 25 watt charging, no issues there. This is an extremely solid phone for $200. Also, I was getting a lot of complaints about the OnePlus 12R, not being a mid-range price point. But guys, if you go on OnePlus website and it's $499, if you trade in any device, it'll drop to $399. So it's more in that mid-range price point. Also, if you want to spend around like $400, another phone that I really like is the Pixel 8a. It's $400 as well too. Extremely good phone if you want a mid-range Pixel and you want to spend that type of money. But yeah, so thanks for watching this, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.